So for the last couple of videos you have been following along while I was building Engage a Lot, which is a tool that makes it easier for YouTubers to answer their YouTube comments by using only keyboard shortcuts instead of their mouse. And I'm happy to announce that Engage a Lot is now live and can be used. So this means the Chrome extension is up in the Chrome Web Store, the website is up and running and you can create a user account, and of course the server is running as well and can serve HTTP requests. And in this video I want to walk you a little bit through the process and the steps I had to take in order to deploy these different parts, the Chrome extension, the website and the server. I want to explain what I had to do in order to get this stuff up and running, what tips I have learned in the process and what problems I ran into. So let's start with the website, which you can find on engagealot.com. So this is not on localhost on my machine anymore, you can actually reach this website via this URL. First of all, I know that the design is not beautiful yet, let's phrase it this way. I'm not the best designer, but this hasn't been my main focus for now. I try to get a new SaaS up and running, and my first priority is that it's actually working and not that the design is beautiful. Although I have to say that I actually don't find it that ugly. It reminds me a bit of the Lidl colors. So the website is pretty simple. It consists of a landing page which has some text that describes the extension, what it's for, and this video which explains the functionality in video form, so people don't have to read so much. And then we have this button here which simply brings us to the Chrome Web Store where you can install this extension. So right now I don't have many users yet because I only released it a few days ago. But if you know any YouTubers, then please do me a favor and point them to engagealot.com. Let them try it out, take a look at this. I have some really nice ideas for additional features I want to add in the future. So yeah, here you can install the extension, and the other pages on the website right now are the pricing page. I have to fine tune this. This is not the final price yet. I don't know if it should be lower or higher. I will see. It also depends on what other features I add in the future. So I built this pricing table here in HTML and CSS, following a tutorial by WebDev Simplified. It was really fun. And we also have this account page here, which is also pretty simple right now. It contains some information about your current license, how many interactions you have used up of your current plan, and a link to the pricing table. And did you notice how fast these links work? Remember that this is not running on localhost anymore. This is actually a real URL on a web hosting platform. But when we click a link, it switches almost instantly, and this is one benefit of React. When I click a link, it doesn't actually load the URL from scratch again. Instead, it just replaces the component that shows the content of the page. So you can also see that the navbar here at the top is very static. It actually doesn't reload. It stays there even if I go to a different sub URL. So this is what I really like about React so far. You can build these really snappy, fast websites, and I'm amazed by this. Yeah, and besides that, I'm using React Bootstrap, which gives you some components that you can use, and so you don't have to build them yourself. Right now, the only component from Bootstrap I'm using is this pop-up menu here. So this is basically something you just plug in, and you don't have to write the logic for this, how to create this, how to show this from scratch. So later there will probably be more menu points in here. Right now this is only a way to log out. Yeah, and then we can sign in again via Google over this Google login button. Okay, cool. So yeah, building this website in React has been a ton of fun, and as I already mentioned earlier, React is very similar to Jetpack Compose on Android. So if you already know Jetpack Compose, then you will have a very easy time learning React and build really nice websites with this. I think Jetpack Compose actually took inspiration from React. The concepts are very similar, the way state works, the way you build and update components and so on. It's nice, it works, and it's a lot of fun. And the easiest way to set up such a React project and the toolchain and all the tools you need for it, instead of doing it manually, you can use something called Create React App, which is basically just a command you execute in the terminal of VS Code. This one here, it's described on this page, and then it sets up everything for you. And by that I mean it sets up the core pieces you need, so you can start building it, like the index.html file where the website is rendered in, and also some commands you need to run this in developer mode and in production. But it's all described on this website, so check this out. And when you are then ready to deploy your website, your React app, to an actual web hosting so people can reach it, then what you do is you open the command line and you run a command either with yarn or with npm, depending on what package manager you use. I use yarn, and then you write run build. And when you execute this, it takes a few seconds and it basically takes all your code and it turns it into a more optimized form that's ready to be deployed on a web host. And more optimized means is that it, for example, minifies your code. So it takes our normal code, which is written in a way that it's human readable and we can work with it, and it turns it into something like this, which is this more uglier kind of JavaScript that's written all in one line. And the code is also changed in a way that it's more efficient when it runs. So it runs faster. It's harder for humans to read. This is why we only get this code when we execute this run build command. This is auto-generated for us, and this is what we end up uploading to our web host. And this is really something I like about this whole Create React app toolchain. It sets up all of this already, so we can just execute it. And this is also why I rewrote my Chrome extension in React, whereas before I wrote it in normal plain JS, HTML and CSS, I actually rewrote my Chrome extension in React to use this toolchain and automatically minify the code and everything. But we will talk about this a little bit more later in this video when we go over the extension. So, and then when you have your production ready minified code, you of course need a web hosting, and I choose Hostinger, which also sponsor this video. I've been really happy with them so far. The website is fast, as you could see. The UI inside Hostinger is very intuitive, very easy to use. I have been using a different web hosting provider before that, and I can tell you that Hostinger is definitely much better. And since they are sponsoring this video, I also have a really nice discount code for you in case you want to deploy your own website. Maybe you want to build your own React website as a portfolio website or as a practice project or a real business, whatever you want to build. And I recommend that you use Hostinger as well. And with my discount code, the hosting is very cheap. So for a normal website like the React website I've built, you want to use the normal web hosting here. And here you can see the different plans available. I use the premium shared web hosting. I think it has the best bang for the buck. I'm really happy with it. And here you can see the stuff that's included. It contains a free domain, so something like engagealot.com, for example. You don't have to buy this separately. A free SSL certificate, which basically adds HTTPS to your website, which is necessary these days. Otherwise, the browser will give you a warning if you try to reach this website, and some stuff will not even work. So an SSL certificate is mandatory these days. You absolutely need this, and you get this for free with every hosting plan on Hostinger. Okay, and some nice other features like email accounts, business emails, or instead of having an email address like engagealot@gmail.com, which is not very professional, this gives me an email address that ends with engagealot.com, like info@engagealot.com or florian@engagealot.com, which is much more professional. So yeah, you get this for free here as well. So definitely check out Hostinger. The prices are really cheap. There is not much you can do wrong with it. Look at this, $3 per month for hosting. That's not a hard choice to make. And you can get even more discount by using a discount code specifically for viewers of my videos, which is called Coding in Flow, all in one word. So when I apply this discount code, you can see that the price gets even lower. And depending on the plan you choose, this can be up to 91% discount. So yeah, that's a really nice price for 48 months of hosting. And of course, you can also choose 12 months if you want a shorter duration, $40. That's nothing. So I really recommend Hostinger. I'm really happy with them so far. And now let's actually walk through the back end of Hostinger and the process of uploading the website, how this all works. Alright, so after you have signed up in Hostinger and choose a hosting plan, this is basically the back end you will see. And as you can see, it's all really neatly organized, and yeah, it's fun to work with. As I already said, I had a different hosting service in the past, and there everything was confusing and you barely could find anything. Yeah, but here on Hostinger, it's all really easier to work with. So yeah, you have all these different settings here. The SSL certificate that you get for free can be installed automatically. So this is basically just a few clicks. You don't even have to do anything manually here. You just click a button that tells you to install it, and then it just works. And in order to upload our website, we use the file manager. Or alternatively, we can use this import website button, which makes the process even easier. And what this basically does is it uploads the files, so the files in the build folder that React builds for us, into this public HTML folder here, which is basically where the website then is located, the website that the user sees when they visit engagealot.com or your URL. So we can go into this folder, and here are these files. Where do we get these files from? Now this is what React creates for us when we run this build command I showed you earlier. It generates this build folder which contains all the optimized files, and then you just upload these files into this file manager here, into the public HTML folder, and that's basically it. Then the user can visit your website. And again, this import website button here makes this a bit easier. As you can see, they put it into this folder automatically, and they unzip it for you if you upload a zip file. And then it looks like this. There's only one additional file you have to upload, which is this htaccess file. So the website also works without this htaccess file, but if I remember it correctly, the problem without this file is that if you open a sub URL, for example, engagealot.com/login, directly by typing in the URL into the browser, it wouldn't bring us to the login page, but to the home page instead. And we could only get to these different sub URLs by clicking these buttons. This htaccess file is what takes care of this. And this is actually a really small file. We can actually take a look in there. So I've written this myself, but I found all of this in Google. So let's open it and take a look in here. This is all the content that's in there. I found this on Stack Overflow. Of course, other people have to create the same file, so it's nothing difficult to figure out. Other people have already written this for you. And yeah, this takes care of bringing us to the proper subdirectories. I think this is basically all this is for, as far as I understand. Yeah, this is the only other file besides what React creates in this build folder that we have to upload to our web hosting. And as soon as these files are in here, we can reach engagealot.com or your website. So this whole deployment process of a website is really simple. But of course, you don't have to build your website with React. You can also use something like WordPress. They have installers for this, or whatever other framework you want to use. So deploying the website is very easy. Unfortunately, deploying a server is not as easy, but this is not Hostinger's fault. It's just how deploying a server works. You need to do more fine-grained stuff. You need to do more setup yourself. And I have my server hosting also on Hostinger. Again, I'm really happy with this. It's super fast and it works, and it hasn't been down ever since I used it. For a server, you need a different kind of hosting. You don't use the shared web hosting that I showed you earlier. Instead, you use something called VPS, which stands for Virtual Private Server. It's a bit more expensive, but it gives you dedicated resources. What this means is that you don't share resources with other websites, like on shared web hosting, as the name implies, but you have your own dedicated resources. And this is necessary for a server because it has to be super stable, right? It's okay if a website has kind of a hiccup when it loads, but a server needs to reply very fast to HTTP requests, otherwise the extension or the tool you are building will not work properly. So yeah, we use VPS for this. And this also has a very nice and neat backend. As you can see, we have a lot of information at first glance. Yeah, and when you set up the server, you can choose between different operating systems that you want to use. And they are all Linux based, just different distributions of Linux. We can either choose a version with a control panel, which is basically a UI that's supposed to make this a bit easier. As you can see, we have Ubuntu with different kind of panels, Debian, CentOS, but I actually choose OS only, and I choose Ubuntu 2004. OS only means that we have to use the command line to interact with it, but I found that most tutorials out there actually only use the command line and not control panels, so I actually found this easier. And the way this works is that you actually have to open the command line on your operating system, and then you log into this server, into this Linux server, and then you use Linux commands to set all of this up. And again, as a newbie, this is difficult, to be honest. I needed a while to figure this out. But only the first time. After you have set this up the very first time, it becomes easier because you know all the necessary steps. And I want to thank two people for this. First of all, Brett Traversy from the Traversy Media channel, which probably most of you already know, has a really nice step-by-step tutorial on this, which I followed and it works. And it explains how to set up the server into command line with all the necessary stuff, firewall and so on. And I want to personally thank Deep Devakar, which is one of my followers on Instagram, and he helped me set this up the first time. And without him, I wouldn't have figured this out. Because yeah, it's intimidating the first time. Setting up a website is easy, setting up a server for the first time is difficult. But we did it and the server is up and running. And I want to thank one more YouTube channel, and that's Network Chuck, because he has a really nice video about how to make your Linux server more secure, so it's less likely to get hacked. Yeah, and the way this stuff works is that you do all of this, as I already said, over the command line. You go in there, you create a folder, and you use commands like git clone to get your code into on the server, and then you set it up so that it starts running, and it keeps running even if you close the command line, and then the server can serve HTTP requests. And the main purpose of the server right now is basically to handle user accounts. It's what connects our app, our extension and the React website to our MongoDB database, where the data of all these different users is stored, and the server handles authentication, so every user only gets the data that belongs to them. And one thing I was wondering is, does a server need a URL, like engagealot.com for example? Or is it enough if we just use it via its IP address, which you can see up here? Because you can actually type this IP address into the address bar of the browser, and you can reach this, and you can reach all these different endpoints. And I had to research this a little bit, but it turns out that you actually do need a real URL. Otherwise, you can't get an SSL certificate, and without SSL, you don't have HTTPS, which means that you can't really create a secure connection between your app and the server. So if you send data between the app and the server, you shouldn't do this over HTTP, you want to do this over HTTPS. And again, you can only get this if your server has a real URL. And I have this URL also via Hostinger. And in this case, it's called EngageAlot server. This is how we can reach our server and how our app can reach our server. And for example, this is one of these endpoints we have where we can make a GET request on. This returns us this plan with the name free. This is the free plan, the ID of it in our database, the interaction limit, and so on. So yeah, this is our server, and this is where our app makes the request to and also gets the user data, for example. But of course, this is secured via authentication, so you can only get the user data for yourself, basically, after you have logged in. Yeah, so I'm really happy with the VPS hosting on Hostinger. And there are two features in particular that really saved my behind in the past. One of them are snapshots and backups. So if you need to do something on your server and you're not sure if you know what you are doing, and there's a possibility to destroy your server or make it dysfunctional, you can make a snapshot. And as the name implies, this is just a snapshot at this time when you make it, and if something goes wrong and you mess up your server, you can just restore it, and it will be set back to this previous state, and it just works again. And I had to use this in the past because I did some mistakes, but this worked flawlessly. Then after a few seconds, the snapshot was restored and the server was up and running again. So I'm really happy with this. Then also one thing that happened is that I actually accidentally locked myself out when setting up the firewall wrongly. And then I used this other feature here, reset firewall. You just click this button, it resets the firewall, and then you get into your server again and you can set up the firewall properly. So yeah, these two features here really saved my behind in the past. And you can find the VPS hosting on the pricing page on Hostinger as well. Instead of the web hosting, you click on VPS hosting. Again, it's a bit more expensive because you need dedicated resources, but yeah, this is necessary for a server and it just works, and yeah, the UI is really nice. Yeah, and then of course we still have the Chrome extension, which, as I already hinted at earlier, I've also rewritten in React. I just think it's more future-proof. If I want to make this pop-up here more sophisticated in the future, for example add a pop-up menu or other screens in here, it's just easier to do with React than with plain HTML and JS. But there are also other benefits of using React. One of them is, as I already mentioned earlier, when we build the code for production, it automatically minifies the code. And this is important to me because the code will be installed in the browser of the user. They can see the code actually, they can look at it. And if the code is plain and unchanged, then it's easy to reverse engineer or tamper with the extension, crack it, for example. But when the code is minified, it not only is faster and runs faster, but it's also harder to reverse engineer. Now, really obfuscating your code, which means making it even harder to read on purpose, is not allowed on the web store anymore. They won't accept your extension if you do that, but you can minify it, which makes it already quite a bit harder to read. And yeah, now the extension feels much faster in my opinion. As you can see, it's really snappy and it just works. And again, I use the same create React app command to set up all of this. And it also adds some other nice features, for example ESLint, which is what gives you these little hints here if your code is not optimal. For example, if I use 2 equal signs instead of 3, this is not set up by default in normal JS, but create React app sets this up for you. And yeah, writing the extension in React is just easier in the long term, especially I think. But it needs some special setup. This was the only downside. Setting it up for a website is easier. Setting it up for a Chrome extension needs some additional steps because it has to create the correct files with the correct file names. There are tutorials for this online if you want to do it yourself, but I remember that the first time I tried this, I found it too confusing, and this is why I ended up writing the extension in plain JS. But after I built my website in React and I understand what the different components are for, I found it easier to understand the necessary steps to also set up the extension in React. So yeah, it's worth it. Now uploading your server or your website is basically instant. You have full control over it. As soon as you deploy the code, it's available. Of course, in the Chrome Web Store, just like in the Play Store or Apple's App Store, it's a bit different because they actually check your code and they have to accept it before people can download it. But they accepted my code the second time I uploaded it. The first time I had some unnecessary permissions in there, and then Google answered me via email and said, hey, please remove these permissions before we can accept this. And they also really didn't figure out the login process, I think, because I had this email waiting list sign up form on my website, and I could see on my database that they tried to log in via this email input form apparently. So what I did is I removed this email form and only left the normal login button, and then the second time it worked, they figured it out and they accepted my extension. Again, if you know any YouTubers that could use this, please show them. Engage a lot, would make me really happy. So yeah, all the different pieces are up and running, the extension is available, but of course I'm not done yet. For example, I still need a proper payment processor. Right now when you try to purchase a license, it shows you a message to send me an email, and then we have to do the payment manually because I haven't implemented a real payment processor yet. And I want to use Paddle for this, and they first have to accept me before I can implement the payment functionality. Why don't I use Stripe? Now Stripe is the industry leader in this regard when it comes to online payments, but they don't handle taxes for you. And with taxes I mean VAT, value-added tax, which is a kind of sales tax, especially in Europe. And no matter where you live in the world, you actually have to gather this value-added tax from your customers if they, for example, live in a EU country. And if you use a payment processor like Stripe, you have to do all of this yourself. You have to sign up for these taxes in these different countries. You have to know what limits they have, when do you have to pay this tax to the corresponding country, and so on. Paddle takes care of this because they basically act as an intermediate between you and your customer. Of course, they take a slightly higher fee than Stripe, but it's worth it because then I don't have to worry about this tax stuff anymore. So yeah, my next plan is to implement Paddle as soon as possible so that people actually get a streamlined, automated purchase process when they try to buy a license. And yeah, the next step after this is to find more users, market the extension properly, see if people actually find it useful. I don't know that yet, but I have some really cool ideas for additional features in the future. And of course, I will keep you updated through the whole process. I will keep making these vlogs. They are fun for me and I really enjoy building this. So subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. Again, if you know any YouTubers or you are a YouTuber yourself, please try out Engage a Lot. It has a free tier, so you don't even have to pay anything if you don't want to. And then I hope I see you in my next videos. Take care.